What if happiness runs in the family? Coming up on Unscripted Faith, we're joined by Rob Mack, celebrity life coach, keynote speaker, best-selling author, TV host, and yes, my brother. Ivy League educated and one of only a few dozen people in the world to earn a master's in applied positive psychology. Rob brings rare insight into the science of happiness and the heart to match it. My brother's message reminds us that happiness isn't accidental, it's cultivated. Let's go. Welcome to Unscripted Faith. I am so excited. I mean, that's an understatement today, okay? Because my guest is my brother Rob, a hero, a uncle to my girls who call him Puppy, and most importantly, one who we lean on for wisdom and truth. Rob, welcome to Unscripted Faith today.
I'm so happy to be here, Ange. I cannot tell you how happy I am to be here. So great.
I am so honored to have you. I mean, Rob, you have graced the, TV, E! News, and Access Hollywood, and on all these different shows as a celebrity life coach, and running your own business now. But I had the privilege, I should say, or you had the privilege of growing up with me, and I had the privilege of growing up with you. So before we hop into all things happiness and walking this journey out with God, share with me your experience growing up as a Mac.
Oh, boy. I mean, it was full of blessings and full of love. I mean, I think our family is one of the most loving, self-sacrificing families and individuals I've ever met. And also, I grew up very, very depressed. I was very, very anxious, and I was very unhappy. So it's ironic that I'm a happiness coach now. That was not on my radar or my bingo card at all, ever. I think my first memories were about 6 or 7 years of age, just being deeply depressed and self-loathing, self-judgmental, and anxious, and that depression deepened into dysphoria, and then eventually I became seriously suicidal.
And Rob, what do you think at the core of you, what was that motivator that kind of had you in that sadness? Because, I mean, I didn't know you were sad. You're my older brother, and you were always playing with me and so kind. But what do you think was the core of that?
Well, first of all, you were a little fun ball of energy. So I think if you ever felt any positivity from me, it was coming from you. It just reflected back. So, I mean, for me, I think at 6 or 7, we were lucky, right? Because we have such a beautiful, all-loving, self-sacrificing mother. And we also have incredibly loving, self-sacrificing father. And it was also, I think the challenges and stresses that every family experiences, we experience. And you internalize a lot of these things. So I, growing up, really was extraordinarily hard on myself. I wanted to do so well. I wanted to, impress my family and my friends, and I wanted to, just achieve. I wanted to achieve. I was very achievement-oriented. And I always assumed that if I achieved enough, I'd eventually find fulfillment. I'd be happy, that you just expect that. And my dream was to become a professional basketball player. So I played every day, all day. I mean, I would play until my hands would bleed. I'd play in the snow. I'd shovel snow, just in the hopes that one day I could become a professional basketball player. And that if I did that, I'd eventually have friends and maybe even a girlfriend, and I'd make enough money and I'd get enough status and respect that people would love me in the way that I want to be loved, and I'd feel happy in the way that I wanted to feel happy. Well, I never achieved that dream, but I did achieve a lot of other things. I was thrown into my high school class. I eventually made some friends. I got to go to great colleges. I eventually got a great job making great money. But instead of it diluting or diminishing the depression, it only deepened it. And I eventually got to a place where I was experiencing suicidal ideation, meaning I was thinking about killing myself so often that I don't remember much else for many, many years. I just would wake up every day and think how badly and how desperately I wanted my life to end, because the things that I was achieving weren't making me feel better. In fact, a lot of them were making me feel worse. So I eventually got to a place where I started doing some research, and I decided that I was going to slash my wrist. I didn't want it to be a big deal. I don't know why I chose that, because of that access. And so anyway, I remember getting a kitchen knife, steak knife, and I dug it into my wrist. I can't see it now because I got a nice little watch covering it up, but I still have the suicide test marks on my wrist from that experience. But here's what's wild. In that moment, when I was not only contemplating the end of my life, but actually in the process of taking it, I experienced inexplicable peace and this ineffable love and this indescribable happiness, the kind of which I had never experienced before. It was mind-blowing to me, literally mind-blowing, and it was heart-opening. And in that moment, I decided I was going to postpone the suicide for like 10 minutes. I laugh today because it's just so ridiculous, like 10 minutes, how can that make such a difference? And I always thought, well, I can always do this later. So I put it off, and I began doing a different kind of research. And that was the beginning of a new adventure and a new chapter in my life when things began to turn around. It took years and years and years for it to turn around in a way that felt meaningful and lasting and abiding, but that was the pivot point.
Wow. I mean, when I think about that and I hear your story of this kid who was going through what he was, and I was totally unaware, to the point where it seemed like the only escape was ending it. It's like, for me as a sister, I remember the first time hearing that, and I was like, wait, what? How could I have been so ignorant? How could I not have known? But I think a lot of people have that experience, and some who have even lost their loved ones. Is there anything, Rob, in those seasons of folks around us, is there anything that we can be looking for, or anything that we can even offer those who are experiencing such sorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being present with people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're with people, be present. It's easy to get lost in your own thoughts, even your own thoughts about what the other person is saying. But I think listening in an active way, and by that I mean in a very deeply present way, where you're not judging, you're not criticizing, you know, you're not trying to change the other person. You're just listening and maybe mirroring back what they're saying. You know, it's what a good therapist does, a good coach does, you know, a good minister does. You just listen with real deep presence. So I'd say that's the most important thing you can do. And what you're looking for really is just someone that's, you know, morose, someone that's deeply sad. If you find that people are losing interest, or loved ones are losing interest in things they usually have interest in, if you find that they're sleeping a whole lot all of a sudden or not sleeping very much at all, there are lots of signs that indicate or would suggest that a person might be experiencing depression or at least deep sadness. You know, and so I'd say, you know, look out for those kinds of symptoms.
Okay.
For the most part, though, I think it's important for people to recognize and realize that while you want to support people the best you can by being non-judgmental, by listening, by being present, it's easy to think that you could prevent someone from doing something to themselves. And you want to be careful of that. I fell victim to that for a very long time after I had my suicidal experience, and I eventually came around to becoming a happiness coach and a positive psychology expert. I wanted to save everyone, and I found out very quickly that not only is that not my job, it's not my pleasure and privilege. So, you know, look out for things, and you'll notice things that are just different within people when they're experiencing deep levels of depression and suicidal ideation especially. The important thing to look for is if somebody's talking about killing themselves and they're making a plan, that's especially important to take note of. That doesn't mean they're going to do it, but particularly putting together a plan is a pretty good sign that they're, you know, probably pretty committed.
Wow, thank you for that insight, Rob, because I think that this is something that we face, and when we get in those spaces, we can get very uncertain and full of fear, and then we just kind of freak out, and it doesn't help anybody in that situation. Right. But I love how in that moment where you were staring death in its face, you have this supernatural, really, experience of God's profound love and peace. And it takes you on a journey, not just to know God more, but to research what happens in the mind, what happens in the body when we meet this moment, and how can we help others who are further from God and aren't deeply spiritual to access God in a very practical way. Share with us some of those things that you've uncovered.
So you make such a great point, and you have such an uncanny ability to share insights and to evoke insights from others. Angela, I appreciate that so much about you. And so the first thing to your point, I remember at the time not understanding how it could possibly feel so good despite things being seemingly so bad, at least in that moment. I mean, objectively, my life was really great. I had a great job, I made great money, I had a great girlfriend, I had friends, I had a beautiful family, and yet I felt deeply unwell, right? Deeply depressed and suicidal. When I had that moment, when I'm sort of ramming this knife into my wrist, and my mind and my heart felt like it had sort of just opened up wide, what I realize now, 20 years later, it's taken me 20 years to recognize this, is that my mind was finally quiet. It was finally quiet. Up to that point, I was lost in obsessive compulsive thinking and rumination and worrying and concern and regret and people pleasing, and just a mind that was weighed down by the worries of the world and the worries of my own personal existence in life. And in that moment, in that quiet, in that stillness and silence, it was just a micro moment, but it was enough for the peace and the love and the happiness of God to just erupt, to come to the surface and sort of, erupt to the surface of my mind. And I could feel it so deeply. It was so palpable. It's like a cork that you hold down all day, every day. And then finally you get tired enough and you let go of the cork and it just bobs to the surface on its own. So that was the experience of the peace, love, and happiness that I felt. Now, if you're wanting other people to feel that kind of peace, love, and happiness, the best thing you could possibly do is access it, feel into it yourself as consistently as humanly possible. That's the best thing you can offer to anybody else at any point in time. Yes, words do teach, but most people are highly distracted. I'd say that most people need to see a sermon more than they need to hear one, and you can show them better than you can tell them. So I've discovered that I can show people better than I can tell them. In positive psychology, we call it emotional contagion. Emotions are contagious. They're more contagious than any other element on the planet, right? I can pass an emotion through a camera, through a cell phone, through an email or text message, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away. It's all the way to the moon if I wanted, right? Just by a glance, just by a smile, or by demonstrating some kind of upset. So yeah, I'd say the most important thing is to prioritize being the change that you want to see in others, first and foremost, and then later, if you want to add a little color commentary to it, fine. But, presence comes first, and then the words come in.
I love that. And that truly is real. I mean, that's what we read in scriptures. Hello, somebody, that we're to be living epistles read of men, that they should look to our life, see the fruit of the Spirit, and from that place experience God himself. Say, oh, wait, there's something different here. I need what they've got. And listen, I don't want you to go anywhere because you need more of what we've got here. When we return, Rob's going to help us to understand the practice of practicing his presence. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
When you partner with Cornerstone Television, you're saying yes to hope, yes to truth, yes to the life-changing power of the gospel. Imagine if your yes could keep going month after month through automatic giving. That's what Easy Pledge is all about. Easy Pledge is a simple way to turn one faithful decision into ongoing impact. Easy Pledge automatically deducts your gift every month using your credit or debit card, so your support keeps working, even when life gets busy. It's one yes that keeps saying yes. Yes to hope, help, and healing. Yes to prayer that transforms lives. Yes to the message of Jesus reaching homes, hospitals, and prisons every single day. Sign up for Easy Pledge today by calling 888-665-4483 or visit ctvn.org/donate. Thank you for your faithful partnership and for making Cornerstone Television your home for Christian TV.
Man, I have loved the joyful moments in my life, whether it's graduating from school or when Jean said I do, or maybe hearing my child's voice for the first time. Those are some great joys, maybe even some silly joys like when my team wins the Super Bowl. That's a kind of joy, though very temporary. But the greatest joy is in the Bible where it says, in your presence is fullness of joy. Listen, our relationship with God, we all know it's important. But it's sometimes we're just walking through. But when we really get down to it, it's that time with Him that is an echo of what the real joy will be. In His presence for eternity, enjoying that relationship that we were created to have, the one who loves us the most. What a joy.
If you're just joining us, I have the wonderful privilege today of sitting down with my multi-talented, amazing brother, Rob, who my girls call Uncle Puppy. And so, Rob, right before we went to the break, we were talking about really learning to lean in to the awareness of God's presence, really being present in our moment, moment to moment. And Brother Lawrence, one of our great writers, co-authors, my brother has authored about 11 books now at this point. And you talk a lot about practicing the presence. First, break down this idea for us of what it means.
Yeah, so, it's been a theme throughout history that certain mystics, particularly Christian mystics, have discovered the importance of not just thinking about God and not just talking about God, but having a direct experience of God as consistently and continually as humanly possible for joy's sake, for love's sake alone. Not asking God for God's gifts, but experiencing God as the gift. And so Brother Lawrence was a 17th century French monk, and he had a bit of trouble sort of just setting aside time to pray to God, to talk to God, to listen to God. And he felt that he needed to stay active in his life. And he felt that there should be no interruption in his time with God, even if and especially when he was working, he was talking to others, he was vacuuming or doing the dishes. And so he made it his practice to feel and sense and experience the presence of God, regardless and above all else, whatever else he was doing, right? That was his primary practice. That was his primary objective, his primary purpose, goal, and point in living life. For him, it was his life. And so he tried to do everything for the love of God. He tried to feel the love of God in everything and everyone. And whether he was suffering or whether he was experiencing some kind of intense, amazing pleasure, whether it was great food or a terrible news that he received from someone, he tried to prioritize feeling the presence of God regardless, for its own sake, without an expectation of reciprocity, without any quid pro quo. It wasn't a transactional experience for him, it was a relational one. And deeper than that was communion, And so This is one of the greatest practices I've ever discovered. It's so clean, it's so pure, it's so simple, and it's so beautiful and blissful. And it's also so incredibly rewarding, not just subjectively, not just in terms of how you feel, but the ways in which your life is transformed by doing something that's so simple and so meaningful.
Wow. I mean, I literally love that thought of being made aware in every moment, from vacuuming to being in a deep conversation, bringing that awareness of the presence of God into that moment to experience his goodness. And really, Rob, it changes the experience, it literally transforms. And I can't help but to think Paul must have meant this. He must have experienced this on such a deep level to be able to say that no matter what, whether I'm abased or I'm abounding, I rejoice in all of it. None of it moves me. Do you find in difficult moments, what is something you go to be able to practice that presence?
Well, first of all, you are a living, walking, talking light in Scripture, and it blows me away. I mean, I've known you for 21 years now. We're both 21. And it's just unbelievable to me that every single time I talk to you, it's like you're able to quote Scripture, by verse. So love that so much. For me, it didn't start with this, right? I think for me, it mostly started with just being present with what I was doing, just unitasking, doing one thing at a time. We live in a very busy, distracted world. It's easy to be consumed with 4 or 5 or 50 things at once. And when you do that, you don't enjoy any of them. But when you focus on one thing at a time, one person at a time, one conversation at a time, you discover how much joy there is packed into every single moment. So I started there. And then over time, I discovered that even that was kind of exhausting a little. And my mind would still be going, and I wouldn't always enjoy it. And so then I said, well, can I just do it without thinking so much? Can I count thinking as one thing? So if I'm going to do one thing at a time, if I'm going to unitask, can I remember that thinking counts as one thing? So if I'm going to walk, I walk. I don't need to think too. If I'm going to take a shower. I don't need to think too. And if I'm going to think, I'll only think. Let me not also be walking and talking and doing these other things. Well, as I continued down this path, then I discovered Brother Lawrence and I discovered other Christian mystics, Meister Eckhart and other folks. And then I realized that it was important for me to let go of my ideas and concepts of God. I had lots of ideas and concepts of God that when I was little were very confusing to me. And I got ideas about God that got in the way of my experience of God. My thoughts about God got in the way of my direct experience of God. And so as I let those thoughts go and let those concepts go, I would just feel into my body the peaceful aliveness that's always there. I mean, we don't have a life, we are life. We are life. We have a body. We're not a body, we have one. We have a mind, but we're not our mind. And so the idea was, let me just feel into the peaceful aliveness in my body already. You can feel it in your hands. There's a vibrating, animating presence and energy already there. It's in your feet, it's in your stomach. And essentially, in order to be alive, you feel it on some very subtle level. The more that you feel into that, for its own sake, throughout the day, it's like a dimmer switch on a halogen lamp. It just begins to turn up brighter and brighter and brighter. And before, it was in the background of your experience of life that you would occasionally visit or feel only on Sundays when you're in church, only when you're singing gospel, only when there's a phenomenal sermon that's being preached to you. You suddenly feel in the foreground of your life. It becomes a more dominant experience of your life, and everything else kind of drifts off into the sort of background instead. And so things that used to bother you so much don't bother you nearly as much. Doesn't mean that you don't get bothered. It just doesn't have the same weight that it did previously.
I love that. And I can't help, my mind goes to I think about all the leaders, the pastors, everybody in this world who's experiencing life, but they're going through in such a hurry that it's okay, it's just a blur of activity. And are they really getting to experience the full measure of God, And it changes everything for you. I love this story, and if you can just share it with us briefly, Rob, but I love this story of how you were on your way to a really big conference. He has these remarkable opportunities, as you can imagine, and he was on his way. His flight actually gets canceled. He ends up having to go back home, get his car, drive to get there. Share this story, because I think this is a real life, right now moment of how you can practice the presence despite the circumstances, right here, right now, no matter what. Share that story.
You're talking about the Tampa?
Yes.
Tampa? Okay, oh boy. So I booked this fantastic talk, and I'm going to talk to it's at a hospital. It's at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Tampa. And so I'm going to talk to a group of doctors. And we're going to talk about happiness. We're going to talk about the science of positive psychology and the ways in which happiness, authentic happiness, makes your life better in all ways. Okay? It improves your life, and not the other way around. It's not that when you're successful, you become happy. So yes, I booked the flight. I'm ready to get my flight. And then that day, just the flights get backed up. And before I know it, I can't get on any flights, but I have to talk the next morning at 9 a.m. So we go rent a car. All the cars are taken. I decided to drive my car. I had a brand new car. I love cars. I had a brand new car that I had just shipped from Los Angeles. And I decided I need to drive my car to Tampa. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive. It's probably about 2 a.m. in the morning. Start driving. I'm probably about an hour in on a road called Alligator Alley. It's called that for a reason. And I'm driving, and I'm going at a good clip. I'm not going too far off this, beyond the speed limit. I'm probably going about 70. The speed limit's about 70. I'm probably going about 72, 73. All of a sudden, I see what looks like a log, like a fallen tree in the middle of the highway. So I hit my brakes hard, really hard. And the next thing you know, I'm up against this thing, and I just hit something. I ran over it. And then as the car comes to a rolling stop, all the airbags deploy, the car turns itself off, and it's the middle of the night. I barely have any bars of service. So I go to check what it was. It was an alligator. I hit an alligator. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Only in South Florida.
Yeah, only in South Florida. It's the most Florida story you'll ever not ever hear, but it's one of the most Florida stories you'll hear.
Literally, you hit an alligator, and it ends up being a massive alligator, not just like a little baby. So continue, sorry.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is, so of course I call the police right away, and I call the tow truck right away. Thank God I had bars. They show up, they have jokes for me. Of course, the police officer's like, are you sure it was an alligator? I don't see an alligator. And we walk around at the front of the car, and there's 4 alligators, alligator bits everywhere, right? So what's interesting then is that I'm just first of all, deeply grateful that the worst thing that happened is that some steel that I called mine was bent up in a way that couldn't be salvaged. Okay, the car was towed. I was fine. And from that moment on, I just remember feeling such deep, genuine gratitude that this experience left me totally intact and healthy. And I also recognized I had to get to this talk before 9 a.m. So right then I'm just I talk about this practice of the presence of God. Am I living it? I need to live it. And I primarily need to live it just for the peace that I feel, just for the peace. So I lean in to that. Next thing you know, the cop says, "Hey, where are you headed?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to have to try to find a flight." He says, "Well, I'll drive you back to Fort Lauderdale. That's on my way home anyway." So I get in the police car with him in the back. I feel like a criminal. Because I'm behind the glass, partition. And so on the way, I'm waiting for service to fully get back, and I get service. And don't you know it? There's one seat left on one flight at just the right time to get me in to that talk in Tampa before 9 a.m. so I could, deliver on the promise that I had made these folks. I just find things like that so incredible. It might seem so small and paltry to many of us, but the truth is, I didn't experience things like that nearly as frequently as I do now. I didn't experience them until I really started practicing the presence in the way that I do now. That doesn't mean that anything or everything's perfect. It doesn't mean that my life is without wrinkles. That's for darn sure. But I will say, even when things aren't good, it makes everything so much better.
I mean, and it's so powerful because you got up at 9 a.m., you share your talk, and they don't even know. Then they start asking you about your trip, and you tell them, and it left it that much more impactful because you're embodying it. You're a living message. Rob, in our last moments together, what can someone do today to lean into practicing the presence more?
Well, I think the primary thing is I used to work in the spiritual and addiction community. I was a spiritual counselor for a while. It turned out to be a much different job than I expected. But one of the things I learned from that experience was that there's a saying there in the addiction community that you're best thinking that you hear. So wherever you are in your life, personally or professionally, if you're wanting to be somewhere better, somewhere more blissful, somewhere more beautiful or richer, just recognize the limits of human thinking. The best thing you could possibly do is become less interested in, or at least less impressed with your own thoughts, and more interested in God's, more interested in the divine's, more interested in the universe's thoughts. The more you lean into that, and that means listening, taking on the listening attitude. Another way of saying that is feeling into the presence of God for its own sake, not for what you can get from it, and then watch the gifts that show up when you do that. So the way I say it is, when you practice the presence, you discover or you attract all kinds of other presence into your life, right? They're all added. Ultimately, you find out that they're included. So I'd say that's the most important thing, is just begin to prioritize practicing the presence because you want peace above all else, and then watch all the other pieces of your life fall into place.
That is so beautiful. Rob, thank you so much for coming today on Unscripted Faith and sharing your beautiful, bright wisdom and light with everyone else. I get to experience it on the daily. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so deeply grateful. I love you so much.
I love you, Rob. Love you. Well, you heard it. Seek first the kingdom of God. Practice his presence that you may gain all these other things added. He says, those who search for me, he is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him. How does he reward us? With himself, who is the full measure of all things you're hoping for. He is love, he is peace, he is joy. Look up and seek him.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.